Hallelujah. He's opened doors that I could not see. That really hit me just then, because according to all medical science, the door was closed for me. I didn't have any hope. That's been about 7 years ago, and they told my folks 3 or 4 months would be the most I could live, but Dr. Jesus came on the scene, and here I am tonight. Thankful for it tonight. About 7 years ago it was that I was stricken with rheumatic fever. I was a sophomore in high school. Doctors told me if I'd stay in bed about 9 weeks, I believe it was, that I'd be okay. So I stayed in bed, but after I'd been up 3 or 4 months, I started pitching baseball. That fall went out for football at school, and I thought everything was all right. But the doctor said that I had slight heart damage that would never bother me if I took it easy, so I quit my athletics, went on to school. That year I was a junior, and I went about 2 months the next fall of school. And I kept getting worse and worse. My joints would swell up almost twice their normal size. My legs would swell till I couldn't walk, and my feet. I remember coming home from basketball games, I'd ride out with the other boys, and we lived down a lane quite a ways from the highway, and nights that I'd get home, I couldn't walk. My feet and legs would hurt so bad, I wouldn't tell the other boys, but I'd have to try to crawl home down that rocky road, and it was sure hard, and I couldn't make it. And I went on to school for a few months that way, not a few months, a couple of weeks, I guess. Kept getting worse all the time, and finally I just couldn't make it anymore. My folks took me to the doctor there in Mountain Grove, and he told them to get me to Springfield as quick as they could to the specialist up there, Dr. Glenn. Supposed to be one of the best heart specialists in the United States. He examined me up there and found several things wrong with my heart. Told my folks there wasn't any hope, just take me on back home and let me rest while I was there. While I was in Mountain Grove, Dr. Mitchum wasn't satisfied with that, so he had me taken to Columbia, Missouri, to the University of Missouri Medical Center up there. And they checked me up there, and under the fluoroscope, my heart was so enlarged, it had 2 ribs pushed out of place. The right ventricle was twisted around to the back till they couldn't even see it on the fluoroscope. They couldn't understand how my heart could function at that time, even in the condition that it was in. It was swelled up, and the valves were leaking. Just about as much heart was flowing back in, or blood was flowing back into my heart as was coming out of it, because the valves in it wouldn't close. And so they named a bunch of names that was wrong with my heart. I couldn't remember them all. And one of them went as far as to say that it was almost ruptured. It was swelled so large that in one place my heart was just about to rupture. And they said if the least bit of exertion would just kill me just like that. And so they sent me home and told my folks about 3 months, and that would be it. And while I was home and in the hospitals, I couldn't lay down. Your normal heartbeat's about 78 times per minute, and mine normally then was about 130-something times per minute. And so naturally a heart couldn't last long at that rate. And at home I had to sleep sitting up just like you people are tonight. Had a hospital bed and had to roll it straight up, because if I laid down, my heart would almost double the 130 times that it was beating average then. And so I stayed that way for a year. Meantime, I'd been watching Brother Oral Roberts' TV programs. Faith had built up in my heart because I knew God was a good God. I knew He was able to heal.
That's right.
I couldn't get my healing at home. I prayed for it, and I sought God, but finally the time arrived that my folks told me that they would either take me to California, where the climate would be better, and the doctor said I might live a few months longer out there. And so they said they'd take me out there or to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Brother Roberts was in a campaign down there at that time, so they hadn't told me before that I was supposed to live only a few months, but I knew in my heart that I couldn't last long. I knew my condition. So naturally I said I'd rather go to Tulsa and be prayed for. So my brother Harold here took me down there one night. He just had gotten out of the service. He and his wife and my mother and I went down. We got there one evening, and my mother went in and got me a prayer card, and they couldn't pray for me that night. They said they'd pray for me the next night. So we had to spend the night there, and I had to sit up in the motel room and sleep that night. What little sleep I got. Next afternoon we attended services and saw the miraculous power of God. And that night they put me in the invalid room. I couldn't walk to the service. They pushed me in a wheelchair. What time I was out of the hospital bed, didn't have enough strength to stand up. I weighed about 145 pounds when I got sick, and at that time I was down less than 100 pounds. Didn't have any strength at all. So they pushed me back behind the curtain that's behind Brother Roberts to the invalid room that night. After he had preached his message, he came back and started praying for them. Some of them on cots and some of them on stretchers and in wheelchairs. Some of them were getting their healing, getting up and rejoicing, and some of them wasn't. Brother Roberts got to me and he started to lay his hand on me and he jerked his hand back. He said, "Young man, can you stand up?" And I said, "I think so." He said, "Could you walk?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, see if you can stand." So I did, and he said, "They're filming the services outside for the TV programs that night." He said, "I'd like for you to be the third one in the healing line outside." So he told an usher to get me a prayer card for the outside and to see that I was third in the healing line that night. So they took me outside, and he didn't pray for me back there. He didn't touch me, because if he had touched me, I'd get out of that wheelchair right there. I knew that. God had already spoke to me. I knew my healing was coming. So did Brother Roberts. The reason he wanted it on TV that night. So they took me outside, and the ushers, I couldn't walk up the ramp. I was too weak. I tried it. But they had to get me by the arms and more or less carry me up the ramp that night. Got up before Brother Roberts, and he asked me how I'd got there, and actually in a wheelchair and all. Then he prayed for me and laid his hand on me and prayed a very simple, short prayer. God healed me just like that. He said, "What do you feel like doing?" I said, "I feel like running." He said, "Well, let's run." So I went down the ramp and back up the other side. Just a few minutes before, I didn't have enough strength to take about 4 steps up in front of him. But my God not only healed me, it gave me strength. I had strength enough to stand, to walk. Walked back over and folded up my own wheelchair and pushed it out of the auditorium that night, down about 2 blocks, and picked it up and laid it up in the back end of the car. We drove home that night, got to my little hospital bed. I rolled it down flat. It was the only bed I had. I wouldn't even sleep in it. But I rolled it down flat that night, laid down and got a good night's sleep. God healed me instantly. He's still able to heal as well as he's able to save and to fill. I'm thankful for him tonight and for all that he's done for me.